back on PJ Sports Talk. I'm your host, PJ. And I'm with Downtown Dylan and our guest, Arch Deal. And he is a skydiver. And tell us about your background as a Miller Lite All-Star and how many skydives have you had?
That was one of the most wonderful things that happened to me. I guess they wanted me. We had, of course, the other Miller Lite All-Stars, John Madden, Bob Euchre, Rodney Dangerfield, Mickey Spillane, all these great guys, and they chose me simply because one day none of my parachutes worked. And I fell 3,000 feet, and they said, well, this guy's back to skydiving. So they added me as one of the Miller Lite All-Stars. And one of the most wonderful things that ever happened to me, there's only 35 of them in the nation. They flew me everywhere, first class, had a limo waiting when I got there, stayed in nice suites, and they kept sending me on cruise after cruise after cruise, and paid for everything. I figure they sent me to learn how to do it, or they sent me so I could find out how, and kept practicing with it. So that was quite interesting. That's how I became the Miller Lite All-Star. That was one of the most wonderful things that happened to me.
And how many skydives have you had?
A little over 6,000 of them now, and I say nothing can go wrong, go wrong, go wrong. I had a couple of them where the parachutes didn't work.
How has your parachute ever failed to open?
Yeah, they have, as a matter of fact. One time, you guys ever had a day when nothing seems to go right? That was one of those days. I was out skydiving at Cypress Gardens, and neither one of the parachutes worked. And so here I am falling about 120 miles an hour toward the ground, and people always ask me, what was on your mind? I said, it was besides fast prayers. Number one, if I don't get one of these parachutes open, I'm going to die. And number two, I wondered, how much is that going to hurt? Well, I tell everybody now that 3,000 feet of fall does not hurt. It's a sudden stop that hurts. But anyway, I stayed conscious, and I survived that somehow. Went back to anchoring the news at Channel 8 WFLA television 3 months after I hit the ground, and actually returned to skydive once again to the minute 1 year later at Cypress Gardens. And all the media was there. I think they were there to watch me bounce, and I disappointed them.
And we are talking with Arch Deal on PJ Sports Talk. I'm your host, PJ, and I'm with Downtown Dylan and Arch Deal. And what was your most memorable skydive? And I know it would probably have to be one of the times when the parachute failed to open.
Yeah, one of those oops things. That's right. And of course, I had another one day. I figured, nothing could go wrong, go wrong, go wrong. And then I was out one day, and we had a lady who was celebrating her 50th birthday, and she wanted to do a 50-way formation in the sky. So we got together with her and 49 of the skydivers. We went up and did a beautiful formation, and we separated. We fly away from each other before we open the parachutes. And when I did, I pulled, and the parachute sniveled. That means it's not opening. It's just flapping in the wind, I said, come on, let's open. And suddenly I said, hey, I'd better get rid of this and go to my reserve. So I did cut away, went to the reserve, almost got that fully open when I smacked into the ground, and I broke both legs then. And that was interesting. But I think some of the most interesting ones, actually. I remember one time I interviewed 5 different presidents, but I landed beside of Ronald Reagan one day in the Baltimore Veterans Stadium. He was there to throw out the first ball. I brought the ball down by parachute, and I landed right beside of him. He said, that was a fine skydive, feller. I said, thank you, Mr. President. I gave him the ball. He threw the ball out and put his arm around me. We walked back in together. But he did not give me any jelly beans, so I was disappointed.
And what about the Red Square?
Red Square was something again, too. I really enjoyed that, but it worried me, actually, because it's all, of course, approved. But I wondered, what if one of those soldiers did not get the word that this was legal? And I would have been well perforated on the way down, but everything worked out. So that was a little unnerving at that, but it worked out well. Nobody shot at me. So I'd been shot at before, but fortunately I'd never been hit. So that helps a lot, really.
Yeah. It tells us why you're alive.
Yeah, that's a good reason. A lot of people ask how in the world you survive a 3,000-foot fall, and I said, well, apparently God had some other plans for me, and the devil was afraid I would take over. So,
Well, tell us about quarterback John Elway.
John was quite a guy. Always amazed with John Elway. I had the pleasure of 12 times skydiving into Mile High Stadium in Denver. And, of course, when you touch down, it's already a mile high. So up in the air there, you're falling much faster. The air is a lot thinner. And I came down the first time, and I landed and handed the football. I brought the football down, handed it to Elway. And the next year, they had him mic'd. I was mic'd. I had a wireless microphone, so I talked to everybody in the stadium on the way down, and I'd say, hello to all the folks in the Mile High Stadium. I hear you Bronco fans can really yell. And they'd yell. I said, that's a wimpy yell. Come on. So that almost blew me back out of the stadium. So I had the microphone to talk, but the next time I came down, John Elway had a microphone also. And I handed him the ball, and he said, Arch, are you still skydiving? I said, John, are you still the quarterback? So the folks got a big kick out of that anyway. The most difficult thing in skydiving in Mile High Stadium, I grabbed up my parachute, the big bundle of nylon, and then I'd start to climb up through the steps. And people who have been to Mile High know the steps are very, very steep. And I'm going up there high-fiving people all the way up on the way, carrying a big bundle of nylon. When I get to the top, I am tired. You're really worn out then. But it was a great thrill, and I think the 12 times in the Mile High Stadium is really a thrill each time.
And we are talking with Arch Dill, and I am PJ from PJ Sports Talk, and I'm with my co-host Dylan and Arch Dill. And Dylan, why don't you take the next question?
Where were you during 9/11?
Well, unusual, actually. We all remember where we were on 9/11. Actually, I was in Beirut. My former father-in-law, still a very good friend, invited me on a cruise. I'd taken him on a cruise before, one of the Miller Lite All-Star cruises. And the first day, 9/11/2001, we arrived in Beirut. Fortunately, there's 7 hours difference between Beirut time and Tampa time. So we toured all over Beirut and enjoyed the tour. Taxi driver kept trying to delay us, and I said, hey, we got to get back to the ship before it sails. And we finally got back to the ship. We got back on the ship, and when I walked in, I found a plane had accidentally hit the World Trade Center in New York City. So I got a cup of coffee, and I sat down and watched the second plane go in. So that changed everything then. And amazingly, just a few days later, I was walking on the deck of the ship. A young lady, a member of the crew staff, came up to me and said, you're Arch Dill, aren't you? I said, yes, but got 1,000 people on board. How do you know? She said, because you're the only American on board. And just a few days later, I was walking down a street in one of the Turkish ports. We'd changed plans at a Turkish port and noticed a couple teenage boys watching me. And paid no attention. I was window shopping. And suddenly both of them ran up to me and said, are you an American? I said, yes, I am. And both of them began to hug me, which was very, very comforting. So it was quite an interesting cruise. We'd planned to see the pyramid and the Sphinx. We never got there. The Egyptian ports were closed at the time, so we never got to that. But you remember those moments anyway.
And what is your background as a broadcaster?
Well, I got into broadcasting very early. Not as early as you. I wish I had back at when I was your age. Television was a bunch of dots trying to look like people, and there was something else again. However, I always wanted to get into broadcasting, and I finally got my opportunity to, and I went to a radio station, and I sat down, and the guy brought out, you guys have never seen one of these, you've seen tape recorders. Well, way back before then, they had wire recorders. They're like fishing line, very, very thin iron wire that run across the head, same as the magnetic tape, and it would record and play back. So the guy had my newscast, and the station manager said, here, do this as a newscast, and I did. Later he came in, rewound the wire, and played it back for me and said, "Would you hire this person?" So I trudged out the door, very downtrodden, of course. Nobody wanted this guy. He sounded like not much of a broadcaster. But then I began to practice and practice. And they set up recording studios. Guys would go in and sing. I'd go in and try to do a newscast. And finally got my opportunity. I went from radio and from radio into television. And back into radio, actually, in television news for, well, in the Tampa Bay area, about 15 years on television on Channel 8 as a newscaster, and on radio also. So it's a wonderful field, and I wish I'd have started when you guys did, really. Because you have an opportunity to learn so much, and thanks, Mom, on that. That's a great idea.
And I think Dylan has a question for you.
Tell us about your new book,
Corporate
Fall Guy.
Yeah, that sounds like a pun, but actually the Corporate Fall Guy is a great tribute because Miller Brewing Company hired me as a Miller Lite All-Star. Like I said, they flew me all over the place first class, had a limo for me, sent me on over 30 cruises, and they paid for everything, and then they paid me a lot of money as well. So this is a real tribute. It's the greatest life I had, even as a television anchor, to be a Miller Lite All-Star and work with Rodney Dangerfield, who was, by the way, a very, very shy, timid person until the camera came on and the lights came on, and hey, he was a different guy then. But John Madden, who never wanted to get on an airplane, and Corky Carroll, the four-time world surfing champion, Mickey Spillane, who wrote and created Mike Hammer on the Mystery Series, and the gals, Lori Benton Rice, who was the women's world champion, or U.S. champion bodybuilder, and also the doll who was with Mickey Spillane, Leah Meredith. And I worked with wonderful people, and it was just a real thrill to be there. And I wrote this book, The Corporate Fall Guy. It begins with the very beginning. It's telling my life as a guy first getting into radio, edited television, and then being a pilot and falling, as I say, into skydiving. Everything went well until one of those days when neither one of the parachutes worked. And so it incorporates every bit of this all the way up, telling the fun things, and skydiving is fun as long as the parachutes work. I'll take you guys skydiving with me one day. You got to be 18, though. That's the only, and you got to want to go, and unless you're 18, and even 18, get Mom's approval too, very definitely. I know Mom has skydived, as she has. But you get to be 18, that's something you can look forward to. It is habit forming, though.
And is skydiving your favorite thing to do, or how about ballroom dancing?
Oh, I love ballroom dancing, too. I think it amazes everybody. After all the breaks, when I hit the ground like that, I broke my neck 1 millimeter from a hangman's break, 6 ribs. L1 was crushed over L2 in my back, separated pelvis and all that, and I've broken both. I've had 13 major fractures. And with all of those, I do ballroom dancing, and I love it. And the lady I'm dancing with, she and her husband were in the top 10 in the world a few years ago. So I'll be dancing with her again tomorrow, as a matter of fact, and we've been working in the Paso Doble, which is the most difficult of all the Latin dances. I'm the matador, and she is El Toro, the bull. And it's a great dance. So I think the amazing thing, after all the fractures and everything, you're ballroom dancing.
And do you want to be on Dancing with the Stars?
I would love that. One of the things about that, of course, the chance of being there, that's something else again. But I'd love to do that because, number one, you know, if you see Dancing with the Stars, you see the people they introduce, they come out and they stumble around a few times, showing the early training. Actually, you train for 4 weeks. 4 weeks, 8 hours a day before you ever go on television. So they show the early days, but after that, you're dancing as well as you possibly can dance at the end of that. Yes, would I love to do that, but I'm not holding my breath.
And you can't, because otherwise bad things. But what is your favorite wine and cigar?
Favorite wine and cigar? Well, I like all the red wines, the Cabernet, Merlot, Pinot Noir, the Bordeaux when I'm lucky enough. And, of course, a lady sitting over there introduced me to the Rocky Patel cigars, and they are absolutely marvelous. And so I can blame her for getting me hooked on that, really.
And we got to go to a quick commercial break. And right before that, what is your website?
It's www.corporatefallguy.com. And tune in there.
And this is PJ Sports Talk.
PJ Sports Talk.